Mr. Liang Eng Hua.
Thank you, sir. So I thank the Minister and also commend the MOT and LTA for the significant build-up of public transport connectivity. It's indeed money well spent and value for money, I would say. The Minister mentioned about the fare review, the fare adjustment formula review upcoming. And of course, in every fare review, we wait with bated breath on the outcomes. So can I ask the Minister how he sees the fare adjustment formula being improved upon, and what can the public expect? And also, it would appear that under the current formula, the balancing item to square up the cost versus the revenue is the fare adjustments. So can I ask the Minister if this is indeed the case, and whether the PTOs as well as the subsidies from the government can also help to take a bigger share of any cost increases? My final point is whether can the public transport vouchers be also part of the household support or GST offset package? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for his questions. First, I think just so that we are all having the same frame of reference, there is a fare review exercise. This is really the annual exercise conducted by the Public Transport Council to decide on whether there is a need for an increase in public transport fares, and if so, by how much, based on the current formula. And this should normally come out sometime in the fourth quarter. And separate to that is the fare formula review. In other words, the formula itself needs to be reconsidered, taking into account the changing commuting patterns, the cost drivers, and other factors, so that we can ensure that any fare formula we use in the next cycle is one that is robust and relevant to the circumstances within which our public transport system operates. So how will it be improved upon? And I think by that the member refers to the fare formula. Well, I think we ought to give the Public Transport Council the time to go through the process and come up with its recommendations. But I think we can also be quite clear that it's apparent that there are many factors that are at play at this point, not least of which are, for example, commuting patterns, which may have changed. In fact, we already see some changes because of work from home, etc. The energy costs, whether that's a pattern that we expect to sustain, inflationary pressures, etc. So we should allow the Public Transport Council the space and time to do a proper job and come back with its considered recommendation. But clearly, the intent is to ensure that whatever formula we use is one that is relevant and applicable given the circumstances within which we will find ourselves over the next 3-5 years. On the fare adjustment itself and government subsidies, well, in some ways it's an arithmetic. There's a cost of providing public transport. There is revenue that comes from the fares that commuters pay. And if the two do not meet, then somebody has to pick up the slack. And the slack in general has been picked up through government subsidies. And as I've said, today the government subsidy is of the order of magnitude of $2 billion a year, about $1 billion each for our train and for our bus services. And we will have to see how the formula works out, what the specific recommendations are going to be, and then we have to take stock from there. But the fundamental point, one that I made earlier in my response, but I wish to re-emphasize, is we do need to strike that balance between, on the one hand, having a public transport system that is reliable, efficient, accessible, and at the same time affordable. Because the reliability, efficiency, and availability of public transport does come at a cost, and the costs are increasing. So we need to decide how that cost burden is to be apportioned, not just between the commuters and taxpayers of this generation, but also the taxpayers of future generations, because liabilities that we take on today will also be imposed on future generations of taxpayers. So we have to keep that in mind in making the decision. Finally, the member's question on public transport vouchers to help mitigate the impact, in particular on vulnerable segments. This is something that we take very seriously. Members may recall that last year, when the fares were increased, we also announced about 600,000 public transport vouchers to be made available. That is about the third decile in terms of income earners. In other words, up to the 30th percentile of income earners. Or if you include those who have no income, then it's up to the 40th percentile or the fourth decile. So up to 40% of Singapore households would be able to benefit from those public transport vouchers. And we will make sure that we continue to address the needs of these vulnerable segments through an appropriate provision of such public transport vouchers.